The 2026 NAIC for the Pokemon trading card game has just concluded. In this video, I wanted to talk about how it really kind of defied my expectations for the tournament. As someone who returned to playing the game a couple of months ago, it was very interesting to watch this one. I've watched all of the regionals since then. I think the first one I watched since coming back to the game was the Prague regional. And since then, I've watched all of them. This tournament was different in some very key ways that I wanted to discuss. And also, I just wanted to talk about generally what can be learned from the 2026 NAIC. The first thing that I think is worth noting is that in 7th place, there was a Rockets Mewtwo player, right? And recently, I saw this post on Twitter, Top Deck Forward Check chart. This was posted on June 9th in preparation for NAIC, basically listing decks in order of their conversion rate, how likely they were, or the percentage that each deck archetype had converted to previous regionals. And as you can see right down at the very bottom is the Rockets Mewtwo deck that just happened to manage this deck, happened to manage to get 7th in this recent tournament. I think that what that says to me, yes, it is only one example of this, but I think that if you look at, say, all of these decks in this list, these are all kind of like the top 15 or 20, most popular decks. I don't think that there is actually a quote-unquote bad deck among them, in that any of these decks, with maybe one or two changes, are actually positioned to go really far in a tournament with the right player piloting them. So in the case of the Rockets Mewtwo or Rockets Box player, my understanding is that the new inclusion was the Lucky Helmet, allowing more kind of draw support for this player. A big problem with this deck in the past has been being able to see enough cards, and especially later on into the game, if you get put on a low hand size, if you're playing against Dragapult and they stamp you or whatever, being able to rebuild and continue to play the game and have enough cards to do that can be a big issue. But the Lucky Helmet seems to, in this case, have really helped amend that and improve the power level of the deck significantly. So I think that this is a good example of a deck that I just would not have expected to see, certainly not in the top 8. And it just shows that a lot of the quote-unquote bad decks are potentially just one or two changes or the right pilot away from a high finish in a tournament. I wanted to talk about what I did expect from this tournament and how it differed. I don't expect to take any credit for a correct prediction or the aspect of what I predicted to happen that were correct, because I didn't post publicly a prediction for this tournament. So it would be kind of like Monday morning quarterback for me to, come out here and claim that I predicted in any respect. And I didn't in total. But specifically what I did think would happen, I expected that there would be around 5 Dragapult players in the top 8. I expected 2 Crostals and one other, not rogue deck, but a deck that people weren't expecting that essentially beats Dragapult or has a very good matchup into Dragapult. The reason why I expected that specifically, so 5 Dragapults, 2 Crostals, and then something else, is because of this tournament. The Championship of Doom 9, that was a cash prized online tournament that occurred a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, $125 for first place. And it's an online tournament. It's very rare that these have like cash prizing, significant cash prizing like this. And if you see the standings from this tournament, the winning deck was Crostal, so there were 2 Crostals. There was one Diancie Dusknoir deck, so one deck that has a good matchup into Dragapult, and then the rest of the top 8 were Dragapult players. I think that this, to me, was a good example of what I thought would be taking place at NAIC, because this online tournament is going to attract a very significant amount of top players, ladder grinders, people who play TCG Live all the time. They don't have to leave their house, and they can just, load up for free and potentially win some money. So they're going to go all out. And I think that this type of tournament really shows the top of what the kind of metagame is at the highest level, like really what is successful against other good players, playing to try and have the best chance of winning on the day. And I think that obviously it goes without saying that Dragapult is the deck with the highest power level, and Crustle is, unless they tech for it, is like an auto win against Dragapult. But also there are other, unknown kind of or lesser known decks or yet to be discovered decks that actually do have a good time into Dragapult as well. And so in this case, that's kind of what we saw. It wasn't exactly that, but it was somewhat similar what actually went down. We got, 1, 2, 3, 4 Dragapult in the top 8. We got 1 Crustle instead of 2. And then we have 3 other decks. We had a Slowking, we had the Lily's Clefairy that ended up winning it, of James Kowalski, and then also the Rocket Spidops that I just talked about. The Slowking, that surprised me. I did not expect a Slowking player to make the top 8. I think that deck is decent, but it's already been doing quite well, and I think if you're a good Dragapult player, you kind of know generally how to play against it. The interesting thing about Ross Cawthorn's Dragapult deck is this Zero Aura, which could be a bit challenging because it can snipe Fezandipity on the bench, and Fez is a good attacker against Slowpoke, or as a Slowking deck rather. So that's possibly something that came up in a lot of his games. But other than that, I definitely didn't expect a Slowking to make the top cut. It didn't surprise me that a deck such as Lily's Clefairy would end up doing very well and making the cut. I'm somewhat surprised that it managed to win, but if you look at this list, and if you watch the finals, it certainly does have a good time into Dragapult. It's a kind of lesser known or newer archetype that has a favorable matchup into Dragapult, so it is somewhat like what I expected to happen, but there was a bit more variance in the field than I anticipated. It still goes to show that yes, Dragapult is the best deck, and then it's really about decks that can counter that, have a really good time into it, and top players deciding to, instead of play Dragapult, to play something that beats that deck or has a very high percentage into it. And also, I would say with this Lily's Clefairy deck, unlike Crustle, it's not something that a Dragapult player can really easily tech for, just off the top of my head. Like, I don't think there's one card that, 1 or 2 cards that you can change in Dragapult that would make this matchup that much easier. Maybe if you have your own Lily's Clefairy. Actually, no, I don't think that would do that much. Yeah, it's not something that I think... it's not just like Crustle, where if you're playing against Crustle, you can, as a Dragapult player, you can use Chi-Yu or you could use the Paldean Taurus. You can put that into your deck and then have a good time into it. It would be about getting the reps in to learn this matchup. And even in the finals, Nedi Kosek, he did his best. In the second game where he won, he did very well. He was attacking with Fezandipity, and he seemed like he knew the matchup much more than a person just going in blind against this Clefairy's deck, but it didn't matter in the end, mainly because he had a very unfortunate third game, but just in general, it was clearly he was not favored, and it was his kind of skill that allowed him to even win one of the games against it. Other things that, just general kind of broadly from watching the stream, I did watch all of the games. What I noticed different to the regionals, first it was that top players decided to really pull out all the stops in terms of, instead of going with the meta and trying to put forward a deck choice that gave them the best chance with the best deck, a lot of the top players that I kind of follow, you could say one example, Liam Halliburton, playing Enzorak with the Transformation Tomes, Tord Reklev did as well. Choices such as that, it's really the top players trying to beat the best deck. That was what the top players felt for this tournament was their best path forward. Instead of some of them chose to still play Dragapult, but a lot of them chose to play something specifically that beat it. And as I said, it kind of similar to with the Lily's Clefairy deck, beat it in a somewhat unexpected way. So I would say that Crustle is a fairly expected way to beat Dragapult, but is also pretty straightforward to tech for. But Enzorak with Transformation Tomes, I don't think you would see that coming. As a Dragapult player, even a top player, that would be quite a difficult matchup if it all goes to plan for the Enzorak player. And then one final thing that I noticed that was just interesting to me was, I feel like in at least on at least one occasion, most of the games, we saw either, top players, pro players, or people on a high record, so 5-0, 6-0, people doing incredibly well, making what seemed to be fairly obvious misplays and missing, either miscalculating the maths for a knockout or availability to, sequence in a certain way to actually put themselves in a much more advantageous position. And just generally, I feel like I saw a lot more misplays than I expected, and also just a greater rate of misplays than I'd seen in the regional events streams as well, which was surprising to me, I guess. But I think to me it just shows the significance of this tournament, the nerves that were at play for the players, and how different it is to playing TCG live, at home, or I mean, I haven't been to in-person events since I've returned to playing, but from my memory of it, the difference between that and, of course, being on stream and playing in front of so many people, it showed just how important the kind of mental side of it must be, because I was seeing like incredible players or top players in a couple of occasions and it was called out by the commentators, it isn't just me picking up on it. And by no means am I saying that I would do better. It was just observationally, I was seeing that, this is something that I would feel that a person with hundreds of, games on this, like a top player, probably should know the kind of right way to go about this. But just, I guess, the spectacle of it, the nerves, the kind of, the whole being in that situation was causing a lot more gameplay errors than I'd expected. So that was basically what I learned from watching through the 2026 NAIC for the Pokemon trading card game, and I'm very interested to see how this tournament affects the metagame coming into the World Championships.